Hey, I bet you're wondering, what is this? Well, this is my second channel. This is the first video. I wanted to do something like this for a while, and guess what? There's a big piece of news that is going all around the internet that has to do with casting X-Men. So, this is a great place for me to start. I have very strong opinions about this, and specifically, it's talking about casting an actor who is not white to play a white character, and people getting very upset about that. So, I want to talk about it. There's a TikTok going around that is about who should play Rogue in the MCU. Well, it's not really about that. It's about Keke Palmer said she wanted to be in a Marvel movie, which I always think it's adorable when people ask this question to famous people. They're like, oh, have you ever thought about wanting to be in the most successful film franchise of all time where, you know, someone like Robert Downey Jr. made $50 million in a movie? Is that something you want to do? And I understand when people are like, I don't want to do that. But like most people are gonna be like, yeah, I want to be in that. I want some of the money. And, you know, it seems fun. Anyway, so they asked Keke Palmer, or maybe she brought it up, I don't know. And she said she did want to be in one. So a TikToker named Jacob Fordingway, who I will never stop being jealous of, suggested on TikTok that she should play Rogue, which I think it was at the time a very unusual choice, something I'd never even thought of before. And Keke Palmer responded to that. Again, I will never stop being jealous of this person, and it became a whole thing today. And as one of the internet's premier fan casters, and I say that with absolutely no information backing that up, but maybe it's kind of true, I wanted to weigh in on it because I think it's an interesting question. I think it's an interesting, Rogue specifically is an interesting character for that reason, and I want to bring that up. And if you're like, why isn't Nando putting out awesome TikToks like this? I'm currently locked out of my TikTok for some stupid reason, and they've refused to answer my support messages, so I will never be on it, apparently. Anyway, so Keke Palmer's Rogue. First of all, I've watched Nope, which I loved, seen Scream Queens, which she was in for a while. Keke Palmer, by the way, and I only really noticed this recently, so much work in the last couple of years. Like, she is younger than me. She is, I believe, something like 28, 29, and she has been in 100 projects on IMDb. Now, granted, a lot of them are music videos, seems to be about half, but still, that means she's been on a bunch of shows. She's on the 90210 show. She was in an episode of Grey's Anatomy, Masters of Sex, Winx Club, just like so many things. The Ice Age movies, really impressive. That Lightyear movie, some show called The Hospital, which that could be literally anything. There's so many options for a hospital show. Anyway, so Keke Palmer has been in lots and lots of stuff. I've seen her in several of the roles she's probably most known for, and I think she's really good in them. I really, like I said, really loved Nope. And I think pretty much everybody in Scream Queens is undervalued in Hollywood. We're just getting to Glenn Powell, and we're also just kind of rediscovering Lucius Lavencount now, which, like, yeah, he's cool. So what are my thoughts on this cast? You could play Rogue a couple of ways. She can be, you know, a goth, really kind of down, a lot of pathos. That's what kind of X-Men Evolution was known for. It's happened in comics from time to time. But I would say what people most know her as is this big kind of personality, Southern belle, who obviously can fly around and punch. She's kind of the X-Men's flying brick, and she's always got a little Southern witticism. She's got this interesting relationship with Gambit that people like, where it's like, okay, listen, I get that you're a great couple, but like, Gambit, stop asking her out for like a day. Just give her a day to decide. Anyway, but she also started as a villain. She was originally part of the Brotherhood of Mutants, and then she reformed, which I think is interesting. That gives her a little bit of dimension. And also, since we've already had Anna Paquin in the X-Men movies, and she did the dour Rogue for her whole time, I do think when we get the MCU Rogue, she'll have a lot more energy, and she'll be that Southern belle with all that charm and all that charisma. So just looking at Keke Palmer, Nope, yeah, she's got that. She's got high energy. She's got a very friendly, very talkative demeanor. I will say she maybe in that movie talks a little bit more than I'd expect from Rogue. I wouldn't say Rogue is a chatterer. I would say she's got a very calm, kind of almost mosey kind of Southern patience to her. But just broad strokes, yeah, she'd be a great Rogue. And this was apparently something that the internet did not all agree with, which they never all agree. But this thing really got some people ticked off. And I think it's kind of insane. To be fair, some people just don't think she'd be a good Rogue, which if that's your take on the whole thing, and it's just because of character she played, and you're like, I just don't see it, sure, that's fine. There were a lot of other people that were like, why does Rogue have to be black? That's bad. That's not how it should be. Why can't they be the race that they were in the comics? And to that I say, I think there's a lot of good reasons why Rogue being black makes way more sense. First of all, when Chris Claremont envisioned this character in the 80s, he told the artist, make me a Grace Jones. Like, that's what I want. And Grace Jones was one of those actor, singer, model triple threats who was a very dark-skinned black woman. What the artist did was go, Grace Jones, okay. I think heard that Grace Jones had, like, she's kind of known for flat top, and he gave Rogue, like, big kind of square almost hair. And Chris Claremont was like, yeah, it's pretty cool. I like that, actually. It's a good design. But, like, originally, this character, I'd say, was kind of envisioned as a black woman, and it just did not make it to the page. But it's not like, oh my God, you can never change Rogue's race, because the person that invented Rogue originally had a different idea, and then they changed Rogue's race in the edit, like before she even existed. So I think that makes it makes total sense. Second of all, Rogue is from Mississippi. Mississippi is per capita the state in the United States with the largest percentage of black constituents. It's like something like 37 or 40 waivers. It's around that area, but no other state comes close. DC's around there, but DC's not a state. So if we were going to reinvent Rogue today, like if she was a new character they were introducing today and they wanted to accurately represent Mississippi, it's pretty much like flip a coin. She's white or she's black. It's not like this is Banshee. You know, she's supposed to have had a castle in Ireland since the 1100s. And, you know, that's a huge part of her identity. She is from Western Mississippi. Also, white people, just like a hint. I get that sometimes we're a little protective of certain characters because of how much we like their history and their origin and stuff. And I think that's a dumb impulse in general because these characters are not real. But if there's an origin we can give up, it might be Rogue. Rogue's origin is terrible. Her parents were on a weird hippie commune where her dad drugged her mom and her mom opened up a portal to hell or something. If there was one character's background who, like, we shouldn't be super precious about, it's probably Rogue. I don't completely understand we need Rogue to be white because she adequately represents all of our Mississippi hippie commune. Like, it's bizarre to me. Beyond that, though, I think it's kind of strange because when this question got asked, a lot of people were like, why change the race? And I think there's a good possibility that Keke Palmer is just the best choice for this role, agnostic of race. I really like Haley Lou Richardson, and she's still like my pick, but I think Keke Palmer's good. Only knock against Keke Palmer, she's a little bit older. I kind of want a younger Rogue, but that's just me because I feel like the character was younger in the comics. I'm not positive about that though when she was introduced. Anyway, it's wild to me. One thing that I had never thought of before is that the X-Men, this metaphor for civil rights in Marvel Comics, is made up largely white, which makes sense because a lot of these characters are really old. Like, they've been around since the 60s. And like I say in one of my videos, if you were making a comic book in the 60s, everybody in it was white unless there was a really specific reason why someone was not. So like Cyclops, Angel, Beast, all them, sure, whatever. But a lot of the newer characters they've introduced, you know, Colossus, Wolverine, like I said, Banshee, Gambit, Rogue, a lot of white characters. Two main black characters that people are familiar with. One, Bishop, Indigenous Australian, so not African American, grew up in America, but as far as we know, parents weren't America, I believe, and plus it's the future, so it doesn't count. Are we even going to have America in the future? It's not looking so good for America. Plus Bishop, I think Bishop's father's side of the family is almost certainly Indigenous Australian. His mother's side of the family, it seems like Monet may be related to him because at one point he was like, hey, you look like my mom. And I feel like if you're a time traveler and you say that, it's like, well, that character's his mom then. Either way, neither side is from America, so technically not African American. And then the other side, you got Storm. Now, I used to think Storm, her dad was an English photographer, like from the UK. I have learned since, I don't know if this was a misconception or just something they changed, that he was an American photographer. Her mom was a priestess from Nigeria. They got married, lived in Harlem for 6 months, moved to Africa, I believe lived in Egypt. If they didn't live there, that was where they were killed, her mom and dad, and then Storm was forced to kind of be a thief, and that's where she worked for the Shadow King, and that's where she ran into Professor Xavier. So like, I would say Storm lived most of her life, almost all of her life, in Africa until she was brought over to the X-Men in what I believe is her 20s. And I would say now she's max 30. So Storm is African American, and she did spend a fair amount of her life in America after she was recruited by Charles to become part of his X-Men in the Giant Size X-Men expansion. But like, she spent most of her life in Africa. I would say that's what she's known for. I wouldn't say Bishop for sure because he's from the future, or Storm are representative of just the average African-American experience, the same way that like Jubilee is representative of like just a California kid in the 90s, or Shadowcat is representative of like a teenager from Illinois. And I only think that's weird because the X-Men are the metaphor for civil rights. Like that's their whole thing. Deadpool trots on to the hostage situation in Deadpool 2 and says, we're the X-Men, a dated metaphor for racism in the 60s. So it's bizarre to me that there is no African-American character who is representative of that experience or lived through that at the time or kind of represents that now. Like, I just think that's bizarre. And I'm not saying there's no African-American X-Men. There are. Sync is a pretty popular character now. I would say he's not like an A-lister in the sense that I don't think he'll be in the first X-Men movie. Feel free to clip this when he is inevitably cast in it. But characters like Sync are not the X-Men who you're like, they're definitely going to be in the movie. So Rogue would be a perfect character to fill that gap. And regardless of any of that, we have a pretty good actor in that spot who could take that role up in Keke Palmer. So I think this casting, besides being genius generally, also solves what I would say is one of the X-Men comics' biggest problems. One other thing about this X-Men casting, there were a couple of people, at least 4, on Twitter that I saw that were mad because they were taking Rogue and turning her into Keke Palmer. And that specifically they got mad because Keke Palmer has black hair and Rogue has red hair. And this is more redhead erasure. And it took a lot of people saying, no, she doesn't. I've never gotten that impression from Rogue. It's brown hair with a big white stripe. But apparently some people decided that was where they were going to fight their battle. I have heard this argument before, specifically for ginger characters or just redheaded characters in general, that there's this big redhead erasure deal. I will say, not in defense of that, but just in general, when people lay all the characters out, I'm like, yeah, it's an interesting coincidence. I don't think there is a lobby in somewhere in Hollywood, like someone that's just like, gotta get all the gingers out of there and replace them with black actors. But like when you do look at the list, it's like you got MJ recently. I'm not saying that it's bad or anything. I'm just saying like you got MJ, you got Jimmy Olsen on that Supergirl show. You got Cyclone in the Black Adam movie. Like, think about a redheaded character that you're familiar with from the comics, and there's a good chance she's been played by a black actor specifically. Who cares? But also, it's not like there aren't other redheads in these movies. Like, Lois Lane was a redhead. It's also not like redheads are an underrepresented part of Hollywood, especially for if they're supposed to make up 1% of the global population. There's a lot of redheads. You can name several redheaded actors off the top of your head. You know, Jessica Chastain, Bryce Dallas Howard, and Ron Howard as well. Michael Fassbender, Benedict Cumberbatch. Why would I call him that? It's like he has a weird name, but we all know how it's pronounced. Benedict Cumberbatch, all the Weasleys, all those guys, all the Gleasons. Like, there's just a lot of them. And I'm not saying that their representation is like perfect, or it needs to be, if you have 1% of the population of the planet is redheaded, then 1% of the population of Hollywood, like, it has to be 1-to-1. But I'm saying, like, when someone says there's a very small contingent of people that use a wheelchair in Hollywood, and then you take characters that use a wheelchair in a movie, especially like famous ones, and you cast actors that don't use wheelchairs, I understand the argument for why that representation gap is a problem. I don't think in every situation everybody has to be exactly who they are, but like that's not like what this is. There's plenty of redheaded actors. And also, you can dye people's hair red. Like, again, I don't think the representation thing seems such a strange thing to me, because if a character's hair is dyed red, and believably so, the actor is representing a redheaded character, and it's not like there's no redheaded actors. It's not like we need representation because it's impossible for redheads to break into the business. There's plenty of them. So I don't think that's a good argument, personally. And it seems like, in this Rogue situation, when you take a white character and you cast a black actor to play them, this redhead thing has become sort of a dog whistle, or like it's a proxy fight for people that are like, that character's white and I want them to be white. The redhead thing feels like it's being used to make that point seem more valid. And I'm only saying that because that was the immediate move that a bunch of people made, even though she is not a redhead. So it's not like she is a character that I think any redheaded comic fan would feel very precious about, because that's just not how she's represented. So that makes me very suspicious of anyone who's going to come in and say, well, she should be this, but she's not this. Like, it's bizarre. I didn't hear anybody complaining about Daredevil. He's supposed to be redheaded, or Ant-Man. And it feels like this is, like I said, a proxy. This redheaded thing is a proxy for the argument that people don't want to make, which is just that they don't want white characters to be played by black actors. And if you're black and you're like, I don't want this character as like a pity, kind of like, or like token is, I get that. That makes sense. And that's definitely like a valid argument, but that does not appear to be what I'm seeing a lot of on the internet. And that's bad. That the people that aren't saying exactly what that last thing I said was, but are saying the redheaded thing. I don't like that. I don't care for it. I think most casting of white characters can be racially agnostic, because representation-wise, white people are represented very well in Hollywood. There's lots of them. And on the other side, I don't think a lot of those characters' whiteness is essential to the character, especially a character like Rogue, who, like you said, is from a state in the United States with like 35 to 40% of the black population. That's all I'm saying. So, in conclusion, I'm jealous of that guy who did the tweet, because Keke Palmer acknowledged it. I've cast 100 guys so far, and Keke Palmer is not. And I even cast Keke Palmer in one of my videos, although it should have been Rogue. I don't know why. I felt like Rachel Summers. I think I was just looking for somewhere to put her, and I was like, that should be a good Rachel, maybe. And I think she could. I think that's not a crazy pick, but I don't think that's as good as Rogue. Again, though, Haley Lou Richardson and Lily James, great picks. I did a great job. Anyway, so this is my second channel. Feel free to comment whether you like this or not. If you want me to do more rants, I'm going to try to edit this down. So what you are seeing is the most edited version, which means there's a more unwieldy version of this out there somewhere. But the idea is these are going to be unscripted and also shorter. And you may be like, well, why don't put this on your YouTube channel? I think the main channel is for longer videos that are scripted and more edited and stuff like that. Whereas these are kind of more quick thoughts that I throw out. Not quick bites. That's not what we call them. Speedy nibbles. That sounds rough. Speedy chomps. That's what these are. These are speechos. Speed chops. That's what this is. Yeah. So follow me on Twitter, not TikTok, because they refuse to let me do it. But definitely Twitter at NandoVMovies, and go to my Patreon and stuff. And obviously my big channel is NandoVMovies. Like this video, share it so it gets some exposure. And yeah, I'll see you around.